All right. And thank you, good people, for hanging on to this episode of the Real Leaders Podcast with Ronan Levy. I hope you enjoyed it, folks, as much as we did. Now it's time to open it up for some questions, Ronan. We had one fly in during the show. And folks, while we're reading off these questions, please participate. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, come on over to Crowdcast. Come say hello and be a part of this conversation. We got about 5 more minutes to go here. First one is this. Abuse, this comes from Julie. Abuse of any type is obviously never good. So how do you think business can explain the responsible use and practices in a manner that both properly explains the health benefits while stating clearly the full potential adverse issues that can occur? Full knowledge is key, and obviously the legal disclaimers need to be presented. Your thoughts?
I think that's absolutely right, and I mean, I think that's the responsible thing to do, right? Is to present both sides of the equation. Inevitably, I think, truthfully, when it comes to most medicines, though, like our attempt, and same with securities law, to be quite honest, if I'm going to get on my soapbox for a second. The way we give people information is completely inaccessible to them, right? You see the back of the advertisements for drugs and you look at it and you're like, I have no idea how to make sense of this, but I see that I'm probably going to get diarrhea. And then, you don't know how to make an informed decision. So I think that's one of the things that all drug manufacturers need to work on. When it comes to psychedelics, I think we're working from a different base of information because there is a lot known about psychedelics, both from their ancestral and historic use, as well as their modern study from the 60s all the way up to today. So I think having those conversations is going to be a lot easier because it's a lot more known than I think with many other novel drugs that are out there. And it's really important. And I don't have a perfect answer as to how we hold all businesses to account, but I think, believing that competition, as I mentioned before, is about forcing your competitors to be them best selves, then I think if we just bring the right attitude to it, we can move the needle significantly. At least I hope so.
It's a fair answer. Another one flew in. He says, not a question, but just wanted to say this was an amazing interview, extremely insightful. I'm excited to see the future of field trip and psychedelics in general. Where can people find more information about field trip health?
Yeah, so if you're interested in the clinical side of stuff, fieldtriphealth.com is our clinic's website, has all the information about our practices and protocols and where our clinics are. So if you're interested in ketamine-assisted therapy, please check that out. If you're interested in it from a business perspective, meetfieldtrip.com is our investor relations website. It tells the story of the overall field trip picture. At Field Trip Health on Twitter, Instagram, and all that kind of stuff. And if you're interested in having a conversation with me, it's at Ronan, D as in David, Levy, as my handle.
Ronan, another one flew in. Neil asked, how do you manage your legal risks in terms of patient bad trips?
Yeah, right now we've been fortunate. There's a couple of things. A, we really focus on doing the practice of psychedelic medicine correctly. So we prepare people in advance. Our therapists are very well trained. Our clinical infrastructure, our settings are really beautiful. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at our website, you can see that we put a lot of attention and detail into the space in which people have experiences. But the most important thing I think regarding that, responding to that question, is that the current belief right now, both medically, I think, as well as spiritually and philosophically, is that there's no such thing as a bad trip per se. There are only hard trips and easy trips. Easy trips speak for themselves. Hard trips can actually be incredibly cathartic and therapeutic and actually create the most change in people, provided that a person has the right support. If they have the right support, then generally it's always positive, not always, but very often positive. And if you don't have the right support, then that's when it can become a bad trip and actually create its own instance of trauma. But because we work really hard to create that container where even if people have a challenging experience, it's supported and therefore can be cathartic, we manage it on a practical level through that. In terms of the legal risk, we've been fortunate that most insurers provide general medical indemnity insurance and all that kind of stuff, which we've obviously set ourselves up to because we are a business. We still have to make very thoughtful decisions about business and legal risk.
Well, thank you, Neil. It's a very good question. Last question is just coming from me. I just always wanted to know this. For a company like yours, are you drug testing your employees, and do you allow them to get high in work for special occasions?
No, we don't drug test. In Canada, drug testing is actually not permitted except in certain specific industries. We're much more liberal than the US when it comes to drug testing and policy and all that kind of stuff. So it's just never been part of our ethos. And no, we don't permit people to use our facilities to get high or do anything along those lines. As though some people may see that as hypocritical, we still have a duty and an oath to make sure we're doing everything in compliance with the law. And so we demand the same of our employees. That being said, we do recognize that what people do on their own time is their business, and it's the people who are attracted to working at a company like ours usually have some degree of experience working with psychedelics, and I think that's wonderful.
Sure. Well, Ronan, appreciate your time, my friend. Come on this show. It's been a pleasure. Thanks to everyone tuning in here on Crowdcast. Again, if you want to catch this episode, re-listen to it again, go over to that link in the chat box there and subscribe to the Really Is Podcast on your Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We do about 2 a week here at the Really Is Podcast with fascinating people like Ronan. So appreciate it. If you could leave us a review, let us know what you think, who you want to see on the show, and how we can improve. But with that being said, folks, that's it for me. Ronan,
if I can give one last plug, we have a field tripping podcast or field trip podcast called Field Tripping. Check it out on Apple, Apple Podcast, all the podcast places, Spotify, or visit our website, fieldtripping.fm. A lot of conversations about subject matter like this. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, it's a good thing to check out.
All right, folks. Hope you enjoy this podcast. Go out there, continue this conversation, and always keep it real. Thanks, Ronan.